Okay, welcome to August 23rd, 2021, regular business meeting of Board of School Trustees held in public with a start time of 6:05 this evening. If we can start, all rise. We'll ask Mr. Hoffman to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
You may be seated. Thank you, Mr. Hoffman. All right, to start our meeting this evening, we have patrons' comments. Item 2.1 will be patrons registered to comment on educational issues. What I would like to do is at this point, we do have 6 names registered. I'd like to go through the guidelines so everybody understands. The board will hear patrons, legal residents in Center Townships or Winfield Township wishing to comment on educational issues at the regular business meeting of the Board of School Trustees held in public. Patrons must sign the sheet provided in the back of the room, which we have. And when their names are called to address the board, they'll move to the podium in front of the room, state their names, spell them if we need them for record keeping. Address the topic they'll be addressed. If patrons have prepared written statements on a topic, they may present at that time. A limit of 3 minutes is allowed to each speaker. And this portion of the meeting during which participation of the public is invited shall be limited to 20 minutes unless extended by a vote of the board. Speakers are to refrain, please, from speaking on personal issues and student issues. So we can begin. We have first on the list is Jimmy Fox. If you could come forward to the podium, please, state your name and address.
My name is James Fox. My address is 13036 Cleveland Street. I currently have 2 students enrolled at Lake Street Elementary. I have a concern and question and 2 concerns. On Wednesday, the kids went back to school. On Thursday, I got a call from my neighbor asking if my first grader daughter was being sent home. And I said no. He said, well, I have to pick up my little guy. Apparently, there was contact in the classroom. A kid tested positive. The parent was waiting on the test result to come back, decided to send the kid to school. Regardless, I never received a phone call from the school. 10 kids from that classroom were sent home. My daughter and his son, their desks face each other. There's 4 desks in the group. They sit across from each other. I never got a call from the school. I recall last month they were saying that we would get phone calls if there was any possibility of contact. I don't understand how there was no phone call. I think communication was like a big issue, a big topic last month when we talked about it. I still haven't gotten a phone call. I texted the teacher, asked her if she could give me any rundown of how are they determining who was in contact or what. She said she didn't have an answer for it. So that's that. As far as the masks on the bus, I know you guys made that a priority that the kids had to wear the masks on the bus. On Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, as the kids were getting off the bus, I noticed out of that 9 kids getting off, probably 7 of them were as red as my hat. Dripping sweat. I asked the kids, what are you guys doing on the bus? You jumping around, you running around? No, we're just sitting there. So there's assigned seating on the buses. Obviously, all the kids from our vicinity of the 6 houses where these 13 kids are, they all play together. So they're required to sit with each other. They have their masks on. The windows are up. They said that the bus driver has a small fan that blows on her the entire time. So these kids are sitting in a sardine can for the 25 minutes that they're, riding to school on their way home. Kids are pouring sweat. I don't think it's healthy for them. I talked to a lady that lives down the street. She's got the stop before us. She said her daughter got off the other day and she sat down on the curb. She couldn't breathe. She was hot. Her face was red. She's sweating. I know we're heading into cooler
30
months.
seconds, sir.
Yeah. I know we're heading into cooler months and it should get better. But something needs to be done. They're not even opening the windows on these buses. This is kind of crazy. These kids are first graders. They don't know how to do it. I think it needs to be looked into. And also, I talked to another neighbor, and he has a 6th grade daughter. And from my understanding, the 6th grade girls are riding the school bus with high school boys. I don't know if that's something you guys are aware of, but it might be something you want to look into. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Just a reminder, I do believe I stated in the guidelines, but as Mr. Fox came forward, is just comments. We won't engage conversation or go through questions during this opportunity to comment. So thank you. Next on our list, we have, I'm sorry, I can't read the first name, but it looks like Pierce.
13830 Lake Court, Crown Point. I was small. I wish to commend the school board in its recent decision to not promote critical race theory and also avoid masking the children at all times. Expanding on the first issue, all parents need to understand what critical race theory is and how it hides under different titles of intersectionality, structural racism, systemic racism, implicit bias, white privilege, state violence against certain groups, power, racism, colonization, so that parents can respond accordingly if these topics come up. To quote Ronald Reagan, trust but verify. Pro-American education, not alienating children from their own country, is the goal. Secondly, masking, I believe, works to keep people apart, which can be a benefit in crowds, masking on buses, and possibly in hallways, which might become necessary due to variants in the virus, which have just appeared, such as the Delta and Lambda, which is causing considerable new infection risk. Prevention is important with hand washing, taking vitamins. Immunization with vaccine is becoming an obvious need or indicated and should be strongly recommended. And I discuss your concerns, and you should discuss your concerns with your doctor. Just to make it more difficult, recommendations change, viruses mutate, treatments improve. So keep an open, informed mind and stay healthy. Thank you.
Thank you. Kaylee Chicky.
My name is Kaylee Chicky, and I live at 13454 Cardinal Lane, Cedar Lake. First of all, I just want to say thank you for making the mask mandate go away at Crown Point High School. I have asthma that I was diagnosed with a couple years ago, and I have friends that have been diagnosed with the same thing. And it made it really hard to breathe in the masks, and the positivity definitely is so much better this year. I've only been going to school for 4 days, and it's already a better year than last year was. And I just wanted to say thank you for that, because this is America, and it's our right to choose. And if people do want to wear a mask, then that's also up to them. And I haven't really seen any mask shaming or anything of the sort. So I just don't really think it's been a problem, and I hope that we can continue.
Thank you, Kaylee. Olive Santos Stefano.
Alice Santos Stefano, and my address is 099 West 130th Avenue,
Olive.
Yes, I'm just gonna, can somebody help her with the microphone, please? Thank you.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure everybody can hear her.
Thank you, Mr. Angel.
Yeah, thank you. Oh, there we go.
There you go.
All right.
I just wanted to say thank you for letting us have the choice to wear a mask or not. It is so nice to breathe fresh air and see everyone's faces again. Now we are able to do fun things that we weren't able to do last year.
Thank you, Olive. It's like Emily Valerius. Valerius.
Emily Valerius, 13414 Cedar Street in Cedar Lake. Thank you for your willingness to listen to the parent concerns and students. I am concerned that there are many more harms. Oh, my topic is quarantining. I'm concerned that there are many more harms being done than good, quarantining healthy children with close contact for 14 days. The isolation, lack of social and physical activity, and boredom from doing school from home, or quite frankly, not even doing any school, is unmotivating and depressing. Our children do everything right, everything we ask them to, everything you ask them to, from taking their temperature, sanitizing, cleaning desks, sitting away from their friends at lunch, wearing the mask, on, and they still get punished and shamed and sent home to be isolated, even though they are perfectly healthy, for doing absolutely nothing wrong. And what about the kids in our district whose parents cannot be home with them for 14 days or don't have the capacity to oversee what they are doing or provide them support needed to get schoolwork done? The amount of stress this causes to families of healthy children is causing more harm than good. They will fall behind, and they are not getting a proper education. It appears that you are doing things that are not useful to our kids by taking direction from the Indiana Department of Health on this issue, who I believe do not take science into account before they put this stuff out there. This virus isn't going away. No one can make it go away any more than the flu or the common cold. Before getting the advice from the Indiana Department of Health, what if you asked, why are we doing things like quarantining healthy children for close contact tracing that we didn't do or don't do for the flu? You will be chasing this virus into perpetuity by following this guidance. Quarantining healthy children with close contact for 14 days is not sustainable. Instead of making decisions based out of fear, could there be an alternative solution? In May, I had a phone call with the superintendent's office, and I asked about gathering information on these healthy kids who are being quarantining. Have they gotten any of the symptoms? Have they gotten sick? And I was told, no, that wasn't being done. And why not? Because, the nurses don't have time for that, which is understandable, but maybe ask for a parent volunteer to do it or hire an additional admin with the COVID funds received. Collecting this type of data could have served very useful in making future decisions, and still could. What about creating a COVID waiver parents sign, taking all the risk and holding the school corporation harmless to avoid the risk of being sued, if that is a fear? What if you said, we are not going to allow this to go on? Instead, we are going to stand up against this nonsense, and we are going to stand for our students. We want you to stand in the way of anybody that tries to deny our children a proper education, or stand in the way of anybody trying to lock down and isolate our healthy children. Please stand for the kiddos. Thank you.
Thank you, Emily. And Ann and Brandon Pence.
This is my son, Brandon. I don't know if you guys can hear me with the mask. COVID has hit my family really hard. My son is autistic and takes everything literally. When COVID first shut us down, he would see somebody walking their dog and he would run screaming back into the house. We had no transition this year. Now, I get a phone call after all the schools were closed today to tell me that he gets to quarantine at home until September 4th. How is he supposed to get his education now? I have nobody to give me answers. He just got back into school. His first day of school, he did not eat or drink one thing at school because he had no place safe to go. Do you want to tell them some things? Tell them.
I wore my mask every day, and the only time I took it off was to eat stuff.
Did you drink anything yet?
No.
Why not?
I didn't bring my water.
So now we are dealing with more anxieties of being told to stay home for 2 weeks because he was exposed on the bus. His brother was exposed, but he made it through his 2-week vaccination. Plus, he gets to still go to school. How are we going to deal with this? I know nobody from special education is going to be able to give me an answer by tomorrow. He didn't even get to make it through a full week of school before he's forced to stay home. Give us the option to distance learn or something so that we have consistency all year long for him. I know you guys can't give me answers, but I need somebody to give me an answer. Give him an answer. You have anything else to say? Tell him how you liked going to school.
I finally got used to going back to school, but this will make it harder because I'm going back to staying at home.
Why? Because you were exposed 14 days to keep this kid at home. Who's coming to educate my kid? There's no distance learning. How am I supposed to teach my kid all these subjects? Like, seriously, I need to know, and I want to know now. And I'm sure that's probably time.
We do not have anybody else signed up for comment. We'll move forward with the agenda unless we move forward with the agenda at this time. Consent agenda, Dr. Terrell?
Thank you for your consideration this evening. On our consent agenda, we have the minutes as presented in 3.1. We have the approval to apply for and receive funding from the IDOE formative assessment grant. We have the personnel agenda and then the voucher registered checks as listed.
Thank you, Dr. Terrell. You've heard the recommendation to approve the consent agenda as presented. Do we have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Is that moved by Mr. Hoffman and second by Mr. Angel? Any questions or comments on the consent agenda? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. And action items this evening, 4.1, American Association of Teachers of German Dutch Mock, was that SPA? German is fun? Mr. Harmon.
Thank you, Mr. President. Seeking your approval this evening for the American Association of Teachers of German for the German is Fun grant for $500. And this grant will be used by the German Club at Crown Point High School in order to provide a Winterfest activities at the middle school, hoping that this will then encourage students to participate in German when they get to the high school. Seeking your approval this evening to apply for and receive funding from the American Association of Teachers of German.
Thank you, Mr. Hartman. You've heard the recommendation to approve to apply for and receive funding from the American Association of Teachers of German. The grant for $500 to support the CPHS German Club. Do we have a motion to approve?
Second.
Moved by Mr. Babjack, second by Mr. Hoffman. Any questions for Mr. Hardman? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. And 4.2 is approval to apply for and receive the IDOE ESSER 2 Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief Fund 2 grant. Mr. Hardman.
Thank you again. This grant, seeking your approval to apply for and receive the funding for the Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief Fund 2 grant. This is in the amount of $1,725,277.27. This grant was established after the CARES Act grant that took place just after the COVID first hit the schools. So this was kind of a second tier grant, and this is going to pay for some of the things that took place last year for Crown Point Community School Corporation that helped us through the situation that we had with online learning, the sanitation with career and technical education, as well as staff professional development. So this evening, we are seeking your approval to apply for and receive the funding in the amount of $1,725,277.27.
Thank you, Mr. Hardman. Heard the recommendation approved to apply for and receive funding from the Indiana Department of Education. Grant amount of $1,725,277.27. Do we have a motion to approve?
So moved. Second.
Moved by Mr. Smith and second by Mr. Hoffman. Any questions or comments from Mr. Hardman? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. And then we have 4.3, disposition of obsolete curriculum materials. Back to Mr. Hardman.
This evening, Mr. President, we're seeking your approval, the administration is seeking your approval to dispose of curriculum material that is out of date or worthless, deemed worthless. We're seeking that we're able to dispose of that in the appropriate ways that are guided by Indiana Code 522-22.
Thank you, Mr. Hardman. You've heard the recommendation to dispose of obsolete curriculum materials. That meets the requirement of the IC 5-22-22 and IC 20-26-5-4 and Administrative Guidelines 7310. We have a motion to approve.
So moved. Second.
Moved by Mr. Angel and second by Mr. Babjack, correct? Second by Mr. Babjack. Any questions or comments for Mr. Hartman on the disposition of curriculum?
What typically do we do with those materials?
Well, first thing with curriculum materials, print materials, students have an option to take those if they like, and once that occurs, then we can look to sell the materials or dispose of them.
Any other questions or comments for Mr. Hartman? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. And then 4.4 is the disposition of surplus property. We're going to go to Mr. Akiwa.
Thank you, Mr. President. In a similar fashion or vein here, the school corporation utilizes on-site stores for furnishings and equipment that are no longer in use. At least annually, we bring the expansive request, or at least we're bringing you an expansive request this time to dispose of or donate these items which are no longer usable or they go unclaimed within the corporation. We make every effort in the district to repair, repurpose, save, and use school corporation property, but in accordance with the requirements of Indiana Code 522-22 and Board Policy 7310, the corporation that has property that has no longer any usable life remaining cannot be repaired or cannot be acquired or have any potential resale value. We either dispose of or donate. Exhibit A provides you a list of these items, and we are recommending this evening that the Board of School Trustees authorize us to go ahead and dispose of the items listed in Exhibit A.
Thank you, Mr. Akiwa. Heard the recommendation to authorize the Department of Buildings and Grounds to dispose of the items listed in Exhibit A. We have a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Hoffman and second by Mr. Angel. Have any further questions or comments for Mr. Akiwa? Not. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Thank you, Mr. Akiwa. And this evening we have information items. We're going to start with 5.1, Superintendent Discussion Groups. Does anybody, do we have anything to report? Nothing.
Crown Point RDC is continuing to use its funds to make improvements to 109th Street and continuing their facade grants in downtown Crown Point. So business as usual.
Thank you, Mr. Hoffman. Anything else? If not, we'll move to Chief Academic Officer, Mr. Hartman. Are we all good there?
Thank you, Mr.
Okay, Mr. Hartman?
Thank you very much. As we started the new school year, I would like to just commend our support staff, the work that they do to get us ready at the school level, at the district office level, at the support center. It is truly, it's a major task to get the school year ready to go with all the components that need to be working together on the first days of school. Knowing that there are hiccups that come our way during that, but the work that's behind all of that is commendable. Getting all things ready to go and to receive our children in the community. So just a thank you to our support for what they do.
Thank you, Mr. Hartman. How about Director of Elementary Education, Ms. Ramirez?
Thank you, Mr. President and board members. I would just like to take this time to thank Jillian Alonzo and the educators out at Winfield for their involvement throughout the planning and building construction that has been going on at Winfield. It's really an exciting building to be able to visit and to see the engaged learning spaces that have been created for our students and the opportunities that our children will have out at Winfield. And also we are looking forward to starting the design projects and building work for MacArthur and Timothy Ball, working with those administrative teams and their staffs in their buildings. So we really appreciate the opportunities to enhance learning and really the educational experience of our students throughout our elementary schools.
Thank you. About Director of Secondary Education, Mr. Gianfermi.
Oh, yeah, I just want to recognize our administrative staffs at the high school and the middle schools and all the staff that contributed to the week before school started with our parent orientations and our student orientations. These events have been built into our culture, kind of took a pause last year, and it was great to see them put all that effort in, and just the attendance from our parents and the students that were incoming freshmen and incoming sixth graders at the buildings. It was exciting days for them, and hopefully it helped them off to a better start for their school year. So just appreciate all the extra work that was put in prior to the first day of school for that.
Thank you, Mr. Gianfermi. How about Chief Human Resource Officer, Mr. Akiwa?
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to go ahead and also just thank and congratulate the outstanding job done by our support staff members, particularly our custodial crews, grounds crews, getting our buildings in tip-top shape for the start this year. Furthermore, I'd like to shine a little specific focus here on Pam Maloney and her food service staff. I'm not sure if you're aware, but we have many events that take place, meetings and professional developments, in particular the new teacher orientation. We had over 50 new educational staff members that we put through a 2-week orientation, various professional developments. And I just have to tell you that Pam's crew is just amazing, what they do to support and feed our troops as we get them ready for the school year. I'd also like to thank all individuals, and this is support staff, administrators, and teachers. You know, they all take turns to fill particular roles, to onboard and sort of plug in our new teachers into the school corporation and our operations and our programs. And they just did a phenomenal job this year. So for all those that supported, took place, and made the new teacher orientation a success this year, my sincere thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Akiwa. Business Department, Mr. Reese.
I have nothing this evening, thank you.
And then we could go to Director of Communications, Ms. Allen.
Hi, good evening. Quick update, we're kind of over the hump of back to school, so the registration, communications, and things are slowing down. But I am finally starting to work on the first strategic communications plan that the district has ever had. This is a 2-year plan that looks at some of our most important communications needs, including adding additional platforms that we don't have yet, but also some much needed training for things that we do have. So we've added social media, we've added websites, and all of those things look really good. But how do we make sure that they're working together in a way that's really reaching the maximum potential they can provide? A shout out kind of goes to Taft Middle School. They already took me up on the offer for training before I was almost even ready to meet with them. So we've already met, and they're taking off with some of those suggestions, and I'm seeing some improvement already. Great.
And Superintendent of Schools, Dr. Terrell.
So there's several things this evening that I'd like to bring to your attention. The first one, I just want to start off and have a conversation with the board and with cabinet members who are present regarding COVID, kind of where we are right now as a district, where we find ourselves after the first few days in school. So I'd like to start by just talking first about what are things that we are required to do versus things that are recommended to do. So the first one, I know was mentioned earlier this evening regarding masks on buses. That is a perfect example of a mandate. So that has been passed down to all school districts across the country at the federal level, requiring us to have our kids wear masks on buses. So that's not something that as a district we can say, hey, you know what, I don't think that that's really applicable. I don't think it's a great idea. You heard about the students who are hot. Should we open windows? Yeah, we need to figure out something there. The issue of do students wear masks or not wear masks is something that is out of our control. It's something that is being required of us. So that would be an example of a mandate. Another example of a mandate would be quarantining of students. So our governor has, through an executive order, required school districts to quarantine students. Now, I think it's important for us to understand and talk through And I'm going to ask Mr. Akiwa to talk through what that quarantining process looks like in just a minute. But it's also important for us to understand and acknowledge that last year, we quarantined thousands of people and literally saw no direct correlations or transmissions within our buildings. We understand that the impact was very significant. At the same time, we also understand that per the executive order from the governor, that's not something where we can say, I know we had an individual earlier mentioned, and I think she's left. Why don't you just stand up against them and just say no? Well, there are things where we can make stands and where we can have interpretation and decide recommendations one way or another. An executive order from the governor is not one of those areas where we can do that. With that being said, before I ask Mr. Akiwa to kind of talk us through what that quarantine process looks like, any questions about that, any comments about that? Okay. Mr. Akiwa, can you just talk through and give us an idea of what that whole process looks like as we identify students who are close contacts?
Actually, I do have a question, Dr. Terrell. There has been some discussion at the county level of the possibility of requiring masks in schools. And that, again, would be something that would be out of our control. Is that correct?
That is correct. So I might clarify that. Last year, the health department, Dr. Vavilala, who is our chief health officer here in Lake County, had the authority per the state to come out and give us a mask mandate and say that masks are required in schools, masks are required in restaurants, masks are required in any indoor facility. The state legislature changed that and made it so that she could make recommendations, but then whatever group it is, so here for us, it's our county council that decides what those regulations and requirements can be. She makes a recommendation to them. At that point in time, then they would vote as to if that is a mandate. Excuse me. If they decide as a county council that in Lake County they're going to mandate masks in schools, and they have the ability to just say just in schools, at that point in time, that would be another example of something that, given the term mandate, we would not have any consideration in one way or another.
She had made that recommendation earlier, and the
She
county
has.
council did not approve it.
That is correct.
Is that correct?
Yep. They met last week, and actually that was with her health board to then make a recommendation onto the county council, and the Board of Health didn't have enough people present, members present, to have a quorum to vote one way or the other for that. So, Mr. Akiwa, if you would talk us through requirements for close contact tracing, what that looks like.
Sure. I think, first of all, it's important to understand that we've challenged all of our administrators to work very diligently to try to understand as best as they can where the students are. That's seating charts, where you can get those done. And it's very common for teachers to have seating charts, so this is not a big ask, but we do know that things are a little bit in flux with schedules and whatnot as we begin the school year. So number one, having as best control as we can on understanding where students are at a given time. Easier said than done in the classroom than some of our loose spaces like hallways, cafeterias, and and buses. While we do have seating charts, our routes are still solidifying. People are deciding whether they're going to ride the bus or not. So we're seeing still a little movement there, but we expect by the end of this week that those seating charts should be locked in. This helps us understand where our students are. But once we're identified with a positive case, then our front office or our contact tracing team sort of spring into action to go ahead and examine, where that positive case has been in a given day within the contact tracing window in the school. So, literally, it's a team effort here. This is not done by a single person. Many times it involves a dozen people, and sometimes even looking at some video if we have to. But we work diligently to make sure that we're identifying those that either meet the requirements to be identified in what's considered to be a 3-foot circle or a 6-foot circle based on the circumstances, in hand. And we follow that, precisely, as best we can. Now, please understand that, as much as I'd like to think the kids stay in their seats on the bus, the entire bus ride, we do know that this may not always be the case, and it's hard for the bus driver to be watching that the whole time while they're trying to drive down the road. But we do our best to pin down exactly where those students are. And then we begin notifying our families, which takes quite a bit of time. We have to call our folks to let them know whether or not their students have been identified. Currently, we do have the opportunity for those students that have could be of age where they could receive a vaccination. They would not have to be contact traced or quarantined if they are asymptomatic, not showing any symptoms, and vaccinated. So these are the procedures we follow. I would like to say that we don't have practice in this, but we do. It's very similar to our efforts last year going through this. So I must say, if you have any questions or would like me to further clarify, Dr. Terrell, I just want to commend our nurses for just doing a phenomenal job getting all this set up and organized and putting the time in to get it done.
So one other thing that, as Artie just mentioned, with contact tracing and those students who have received the vaccination, so this is another example of one of those things that's not something that we can decide if we're going to acknowledge or not. So one of the things that, as parents are contacted about their student being close contact, per the guidelines that we have received for close contact tracing from the state, again, the requirement per the governor's executive order indicates that if a student has been vaccinated and is not showing any symptoms of the virus at all, then they don't have to quarantine. That's not something that we get to decide. That's something that has been told to us. Now, the question that I've heard and has been expressed is, how do we know when students are vaccinated? Are we requiring them to tell? Are we asking them? We're asking them. That's a parent's right to decide if they're going to release that information to us, so that way we know. At no point in time do we say, if you would go take your kid and get vaccinated, or here's a place to go get vaccinated. Again, that's not our responsibility. We leave that up to our parents to make that decision about whether they believe their child should be vaccinated or not. So just another clarification there that fits into the requirements that we are given and why it's okay for those who have the vaccination and are not showing symptoms to not have to quarantine versus those who aren't showing symptoms but have not received the vaccination, why they still have to quarantine. So just some information there for all of you as you look at that.
Our contact tracing requires us, for those without masks, to go to a perimeter of 6 feet.
Good question. So a point of clarification for this. As long as we continue to not require a mask within our buildings, it doesn't matter if 2 people within that classroom have masks on and the rest don't, or vice versa, 18 of them have masks on and 2 don't. If every student in that classroom, and Mr. Akiwa, correct me or jump in wherever, as long as it's not 100% of the students wearing masks within that classroom, then everybody has to be at that 6 foot mark. So it's not, well, I had a mask on, Mr. Warney did not, so therefore I'm at 3 feet and he's at 6 feet. That's not how the language that has been passed down to us reads.
So logically speaking, if we did have a mask mandate, our perimeter is only 3 feet.
That is correct.
Which would reduce significantly the potential number of quarantines.
That possibility exists. So one of the things that we're doing right now, excuse me, as we said, we would continue to review the information that's given to us, but then also to look at our own data as we collect it. So one of the things that we're doing right now over this first week of classes, as we quarantine students, we're doing it 2 different ways. One right now based off of that 6 foot diameter because of not requiring masks within schools. But then we were also looking at, so if everybody had a mask on, what would that impact of the close contact tracing be? So that we can compare those numbers and have that information as we continue to review all of this information together.
So Dr. Terrell, in our classrooms, not to debate if our classroom sizes are appropriate, However, with the amount of kids in the classrooms, have there been precautions sent down to the teachers to try to stick to a certain format? I know we've talked about seating charts and getting them in place so that we can help our nurses and everyone with the contact tracing, but has there been anything further put in place to?
So at this time, there has not, as far as, for instance, saying everybody has to be in rows facing forward. So one of the changes that has come out from the CDC and now the Indiana State Department of Health is that piece of that 3-foot rule, if everybody has a mask on and they're facing forward, they're facing forward has been removed. So you could still have students involved in group work. You could still have students arranged in their desk where they're facing each other. Again, that's not the requirement. The requirement is simply if all students are wearing masks, now it goes to 3 feet. Did I say that correctly, Mr. Akiwa?
Mr. Hoffman alluded to it, that, everyone, it's a high-tension world when we talk about what we're doing or opinions, but in my opinion, to reduce the quarantining to 3 feet would help tremendously. And that's the one thing that I've heard tonight that sticks out the most, along with that, where we were a month ago when we sat here, we see a lot of familiar faces in the crowd this evening. I think things have changed, and again, we're just talking about opinion, but mine is that the things have changed in the world with the amount of spread and the amount of, I'd use some examples of schools to the south that may have started a little bit sooner than us, and I just find it hard to believe that we won't follow the same pattern, and I'm a little bit more in the belief that let's just jump ahead of it and mandate the masks. It's just I want to express my opinion to everybody and let you know how I feel about it. And number one objection, number one is to keep the kids in school. Masks or no masks, quarantine, contact tracing, we do not want to go to a remote learning environment. We want to keep the kids in school. So it's not something I'm favorable of, but I just think it's the best route.
Yeah, I think it's early, and we're 4 days into the school year, so I'm looking forward to seeing what this week kind of shows us as far as quarantine numbers, and also looking at what the difference would have been if we were in a mask situation, what those actual numbers look like. So that's kind of where I stand with it. It's too early to tell, but we'll see what the future holds.
Dr. Terrell, as a point of clarification, I think talking about students that have been vaccinated and whether or not they have to, a parent has to share that information. And my understanding, as you indicated, the schools would not require that. If a parent chooses not to share that information, would that student then be treated like an unvaccinated student for purposes of quarantine?
That is correct.
I'd like to follow up with Mr. Warney's comments, and, one of the oldest adages in education is the need for seat time. The butts in the classroom, that's where you learn. I'm sorry that people are experiencing difficulties, but you have to understand there's only so much we on this end can do. We're trying to do what we can to minimize the spread of this disease. By the same token, what can you people do? Because somebody brings it in, it's going to spread. Okay? We don't have control over that. We have control of our school buildings, we have control of our school buses. We're trying to be as least restrictive as possible in good conscience and using good common sense. Now, as we've discussed, if we get mandates, we don't have a choice. We made a decision a month ago, and virtually within days after that decision was being made, the spread of this disease was going rampant across the country. Fortunately, this county or this part of the county isn't experiencing that rapid spread like many parts of the country. So, you know, masks are voluntary, but it takes cooperation from everybody to make that a successful policy, so that we don't have to mandate it. So, you know, people want to blame the school corporation. Sometimes the blame is on your neighbors or people you don't know. And again, we don't have control over that. We try to take that into consideration in formulating our policy. But I've been on this board for over 19 years. And I've said it before and I'll say it again. When I first ran for the school board, I spoke with the then superintendent and said, how do you become a good school board member? The singular advice was, do the right thing. And that's what each one of us up here tries to do every time we have to make a decision that impacts any child in this school corporation or their families. Thank you.
You know, one of the things I probably should have started this with, and I actually even have it in my notes, start with this, and I failed to do so. So I apologize. But I think it's important that we recognize the civility that has taken place in our schools. You know, there was emails that we received during the summer about mask shaming or bullying if kids are wearing masks compared to those who are not. And I'm not saying that there is not an isolated incident or something that's taken place, but I can tell you overall, having been in every one of our buildings over the last few days, the way that our kids are handling this and working through this, our teachers, our administrators are to be commended. If students choose to wear masks, they choose to wear masks, and they just continue to work through that. I think this audience tonight and the way that you guys have approached this, the emails that we receive from others, and we receive them from both sides, expressing their opinions about they think we should wear masks, we shouldn't wear masks. One of the things that I'm very proud of here in Crown Point has been the way that we, as a group, as a community, have interacted with each other without the nonsense that you see in a lot of places. So thank you for that. You know, I think as we move forward, one of the things that we're going to continue to take into consideration is the debate before us really is not about our mask, a great strategy or a strategy for mitigation of COVID. That's not the point. The point that the thing that we have to look at and we will continue to look at is how do we keep kids in school? That has to be our number one priority. You know, I think Mr. Hoffman, you made the comment that we will continue to do the things that we need to do. We've taken steps to make sure. And I know that there are people out there who will hear that and say, well, that's not true because you're not requiring masks. Once again, I think it's really important for us collectively to understand our approach to this has been as the health experts tell us and require what we need to do from a health expert standpoint, that's what we'll do. For instance, if the county decides or says that we need to mandate masks, we will do so. The governor's executive order indicated we need to quarantine students with close contact tracing and gave us the stipulations of how that should happen. We will do so. When it comes to recommendations, we still look for our health groups to give us, and the ability is there for them to make the mandates. They need to make the mandates about the health side of it. As an education system, as a school corporation, our job then is to figure out what it is that we do within our buildings from an educational standpoint to continue to move forward with that.
I just want to kind of put a bow on what I had to say and agree with Mr. Babchick, and it would be nice to get some information, but also stress, as Dr. Terrell said, that it's not a game, it's serious, but
absolutely,
if you can use the rules of any game at your advantage to keep kids in school, that's what I'm saying. I'm not, you know, the idea that this works or this doesn't, or you know, whatever. I just hear that the rules of the game are, if you are masked, you're 3 feet. If you're not, you're 6 feet. And I'm very with the blinders on to hear that and think, wow, they're wagging a carrot here and it could give us an edge. So I just want to kind of put wrap up what I had to say there.
One other thing that I'd like to address, and I'm going to ask Mrs. Ramirez and Mr. Gianfermi and Mr. Hardiman, if they would address this. And I know that we continue to have students who are put on quarantine and how they're receiving their educational support. If you guys could just talk through a little bit about what that could look like. I know it's a little bit different at each level, but just give examples of what we can do there.
You want me to go?
I can go, I'll go ahead first.
Okay.
Okay, let me start.
First of all, as we approach the school year, we as a Department of Curriculum and Instruction put out the practices that teachers should engage in, not only when we're in person at the beginning of school, but also in the event that you engage a student that goes into quarantine to maintain that a level of education, a level of instruction, so that the child can continue to grow, so that upon re-entry, the student is ready with their class. With the practices that we learned about last year, we grew last year, and implementing those into this school year in a quarantine situation, such as making sure that the agenda is always posted for our students at the beginning of the day, so students can have access to that if they are quarantined or absent for some reason, and can perform the work. To be able to connect with the child through a virtual kind of application such as Zoom. We have GoGuardian. We have opportunities through Pear Deck and Flipgrid. Those are some of the tools we have so that we can engage and get feedback from students as well as give feedback to students during the course of the school day. So those are the things that we have prepared for in this event. Yet at the same time, it is not like being in school. And I think as we consider and think about the situations that we're in, we want to try to help students to stay connected. We want them to continue to be engaged in the instruction and the growth, and then we want them to return so that they are not disconnected from the rest of their class. So, Mark, Sabrina, do you have maybe some specific examples right now?
Well, I mean, we're just starting to hit the quarantines, but as you said, the expectations were laid out to the teachers. At the secondary level, you'll see more of the buzz course being used and the teachers communicating to their students through their buzz course, through their agenda, through emails, and just continuing on similar to what we were doing last year. But we do have a lot of those other new tools that the teachers got much better at over the course of last year that we hope and encourage them to use. But the big thing is to make sure that those students stay connected to their classrooms and their curriculum. And that may mean different things for different students. But the teachers need to reach out and make sure they're communicating during that time, whichever way they can do the best for those students. And I know it's a little different for the elementary.
At the elementary level as well, teachers were given the same guidance, and I think the positive is that they have experience throughout last year in how to deliver instruction to students who have to quarantine by utilizing our technology tools that we have and making sure that really each situation is a very individual situation. What it's going to look like for a 7th grade student versus a 1st grade student could very greatly differ. Also taking into account at-home support that may be able to be provided. So our number one goal is, again, making the curriculum accessible to our students, keeping them engaged, and again, making sure that we tailor that involvement based on teacher direction as well as partnership with the parent or caregiver so that we are working to figure out what best meets the needs of each child and what is a manageable practice.
Thank you.
Yeah, Mr. Mears, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I feel like the heat is actually blowing instead of the air conditioner. I feel Mr. Key was taking care of it.
It is a little toasty.
Yeah.
We're just trying to experience the school bus situation that was described before. Apologize, trying to bring a little humor in with that. We have a gremlin that lives within our thermostat back there, and every night about 6:30, it, for whatever reason, jumps up to like 76, and it doesn't just cool the cool air, it goes to heat.
Yeah, you could feel
Yeah,
it, yeah.
so we're not trying to smoke you out, I promise. We're trying to work through that. So any other questions things that we can talk through here for you as a board.
Dr. Terrell, I think it's important to touch upon the process that, how the board arrives at a decision perhaps when it comes to COVID. Also, how your administration processes the information as it comes in. I know you said there's data points and you're following the tracing, you're following the positivity rate in Lake County. There's a lot of factors that go into that. But perhaps it would behoove everyone to just hear how frequently your administration is monitoring that, the process of how, once you gather information, you come back with perhaps recommendations or discussions with the board. If you could just explain that, I think it might be helpful to the general public.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. So some of the information that we continue to monitor, so if you go on the Indiana State Health Department's website, there's a whole COVID portion of that. And you can actually drill down into Region 1, which is our region up here, the several counties in this part of the state. But in there, there's several things we look at for our county. In particular, we look at the positivity rate, what's happening with that, how that continues to fluctuate. But we also look at things such as, you can go in there and it'll break it down by age bracket of what the percent is testing positive in each age bracket. And I don't have the brackets right in front of me, but it's like 1 to 4, 5 to, and it breaks it down to that specific. And we try to look at those, and I look at them on a daily basis. As far as, excuse me, the information that we share as a cabinet, as an entire cabinet weekly, we do that. But then, for instance, because Mr. Akiwa, the biggest piece of what he's doing is working with our nurses and quarantining, he and I and Ms. Allen work together daily to review those numbers and look at what that is, where the impacts are taking place. Then also, depending on the day, the need, where we see the different hot spots that are coming up. And this is not just referring to this school year, but going back to last school year, at that point in time, getting with the directors of elementary ed, secondary ed, exceptional ed, and our chief academic officer to try and figure out what are the things, what are the needs, how are we going to address those learning situations as we just talked about with them. Communication that I have with the board is on a regular basis. Sometimes that's daily. Most of the times it's many times throughout the day, just to try and continue to keep up and let you guys know where we are. We continue to utilize our website to put our COVID information out there, so we are as transparent as possible with the number of close contacts, but then also positive cases that we're seeing within our district. Again, understanding we're 4 days in, but that information is there. So it's a continual process. I wish we didn't spend near the amount of time that we do spend on it, but unfortunately, that is one of the main topics that we've got to address right now and try to continue to figure out what is the best way to meet the needs of our students and how do we keep them in buildings. Thank you, though, for the question. Anything else with COVID? If not, let's move on to something a little bit better.
Yes, let's go to.
I've got a couple more things before we go on to yours, though. So a couple, the things that I want to talk about is beginning of school. It's amazing every year as you will go through our buildings. I try to get into every one of our buildings the first 2 days of school to see our parents, the excitement as they bring their kids to school. The amount of work that goes into that first 2 or 3 days is just amazing behind the scenes, and appreciate so much our teachers, our staff, as they continue to work through that. The Taft development on the site is full bore. If you guys haven't driven out there by that, I encourage you to do so. Lots of big equipment moving, lots of dirt. Right now they're working on actually the footprint of the building, making that what it needs to be and getting it level with driveways. Just some really cool opportunities there. And in the near future, we'll come to you guys with an opportunity to go out and turn the first shovel of dirt, have a ceremonial proceeding with that as well. So kind of an exciting opportunity for our district. Mr. Ramirez mentioned the elementary development at both Timothy Ball and MacArthur. Real excited about where that is leading right now and continuing to help us address the growing needs of our district. Also at the high school, we're getting pretty close to being to the point where we're narrowing in on what those things are that we're going to address there. working through budgets and continuing to meet the challenges that are faced right now with the COVID shortages and different things that are happening there. So really an exciting time here. Great to see our enrollment ticking up from that pre-COVID numbers, and just again appreciate the start of the school year and all the different aspects of that. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Terrell, and thank you for the opportunity for discussion this evening. As Mr. Smith brought up, some of his, hopefully just, if nothing else, informative to the public that may have some questions. How about other business of the board? Does anybody have any other business to discuss this evening?
One thing I might remind you of, Diana has sent you emails regarding the fall conference down in Indy. I think a couple of you have already responded, and we've made the reservations for that. It's not too late to get in on that, but if you would, just the sooner you can let her know, the better chance of all of us getting in the same hotel and different thing there. It's a great couple of days. If you can take advantage of that, that'd be great.
Other business? Good. How about Mr. Smith, you want to kick off board statements of appreciation?
I don't have anything.
Mr. Babjack?
Got nothing for me.
Mr. Hoffman?
I'm going to recognize the members of the Town of Winfield Council and thank them for their attention and cooperation in working out approvals for our new middle school in Winfield Township. Had some anxious moments, but I can tell you that for a small municipality like they are, they don't have a lot of money to work with. They have a lot of asks of the school corporation. Typically, as they indicated, if this were a subdivision or something, it probably would have taken up to a year to get necessary approvals, and they did it in a much more expedited time frame than that. And for that, we appreciate it, because we do have a schedule we need to have a schedule to try and get that project started so it can be timely completed and opened in 2023.
2 years from right now.
So we thank them.
Mr. Angel?
Just to the high school staff for the back-to-school event, morning of Monday, last Monday, for the Welcome Back to the School Corporation for everybody, whoever was involved in that, Russ and his staff, Dr. Terrell. The band was there. It was energetic, and having it in the gymnasium just added a little flavor to it, like it was an old pep assembly back in the high school days. So
How about
a nice welcome send-off. So.
And we should probably thank Dr. Terrell also for the little bit of a change in culture to get the community standing when they heard the fight song.
Well,
Getting
yeah,
everybody
so,
up on their
so they
feet
played
and,
the fight song twice, because not everybody was quite
and he
awake,
was-
I think.
And he was going to play it.
didn't react
He was going to
accordingly.
have them play it 3, 4, 5 times
That's
until
right.
everybody rose, right? So
That's
that
what
was
the coaching
appreciated.
background came out to him, and everybody
Yeah.
listened and adhered to it, and we were only able to get through 2 of them.
And the jazz band was nice too. at
And a
breakfast.
jazz band there
Yeah.
while we were having breakfast, and it was just so exciting to feel the energy in the cafeteria and then into the gymnasium. So, great job to all involved.
Thank you.
We should probably thank and recognize our union leadership for speaking at our back-to-school event this year for the first time in many, many years. So
Yes.
thank you for your participation.
Yes. Next year, she may request to go before our student council president.
Well, nothing with much detail, but I do got a few items. I want to congratulate Mr. Hoffman. Just told us the news this evening that he's going to be grandfather for the first time, a new granddaughter. So congratulations, Mr. Hoffman. We had the back to school that Mr. Angel mentioned, and I think as we talked about the band and cheerleaders, I think we were told many years ago that extracurriculars at Crown Point, the participation rate was somewhere around 75–80%, and encourage all the kids to get out and participate. And then there was a correlation to the grade point average that went along with those that are participating, and it was really pretty special to see, and it looks like that tradition will continue, especially coming out of the struggles of this last year, obviously. But emails, no, not there yet. new teacher appreciation, the new teacher, not appreciate, but the new teacher week. And Mr. Gianfermi, Bulldog Rush, I know that was something that you had a big part of back in the day and passion of. And all these traditions that are now, they're traditions. It's not like, oh, we're trying this thing called, and hear a lot of community comment on how well they're received, and even the new teachers, the appreciation and the welcoming that they get. I hope those are some traditions then that when us as board members are not here anymore, will continue for a long time, because of the amount of appreciation that comes out of them. And I think the key words too, appreciation, is great. First day of school, it's nervous for everybody. It's nervous for parents. That was amazing. So I'll just kind of wrap it up with some highlights and excitement. And one other thing that I just mentioned earlier, you're welcome to continue to email the board. We all receive it. We read it. Sorry that at times recently we did have to put together a template response just to keep it, to get a response to everybody, so they would know that their email was read. I think was maybe most important, that someone just doesn't think they're sending an email to a black hole. And when we had opportunities to personalize them, we would, but we'll continue to respond and read your emails as they come to us. Does anybody else have any comments before we wrap up this evening? If not, look for motion to adjourn.
So moved. Second.
Moved by Mr. Angel and second by Mr. Hoffman. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 5-0.